The most expensive car Mat Armstrong ever worked on was not the one he spent the most money to acquire. It was the one a manufacturer spent years building a system to keep away from people like him, and the fact that he finished that rebuild anyway is what placed him at the center of a conversation the automotive industry has been quietly avoiding for a very long time. Mat did not arrive in the automotive world through a formal workshop or a technical college. He arrived through a BMX bike, competing professionally across the UK with sponsorship backing and the kind of schedule serious athletes organise their entire lives around. That career ended before it was supposed to, through multiple fractures, torn ligaments, and physical damage accumulated across incidents that each compounded the last until the total made continued competition medically impossible. For someone whose identity had been built around movement and competition, the stop was not just physical. It left a gap that needed filling with something equally demanding, and that something turned out to be a £600 written-off Audi. His girlfriend's car had been declared a total loss by the insurance company, and the file had been closed, which in most situations would end the story right there. Instead, Mat bought the wreck back and fixed it on camera using a GoPro, explaining each step as he figured it out rather than after the fact, and the footage showed every mistake being made and corrected in real time with no edit to hide the uncertainty. That approach is what built the audience, not the car itself and not any production value, but the visible process of a real problem being solved without any pretense that the outcome was guaranteed. The channel grew from that foundation, with Mat working in tuning environments and retail automotive spaces alongside content creation, gaining exposure to different levels of vehicle complexity while continuing to film builds whenever the schedule allowed. The real acceleration came when Richard Hammond publicly reacted to his work, and that reaction carried weight in a space where credibility is earned slowly. Hammond's response introduced the channel to viewers who already understood automotive storytelling at a professional level, and by 2019, the side project built around a crashed Audi had become a full-time career, with the question shifting from whether this approach could sustain itself to how complex the vehicles could realistically get. The Rolls-Royce Wraith project established where that ceiling actually sat. Marcus Rashford had bought that car for £700,000 before a crash sent it to a Copart salvage auction, and Mat purchased the wreck for around £185,000. The listing had not captured the actual extent of the damage, and stripping the car properly revealed structural compromises, electrical failures, and deep complications common to high-end luxury vehicles after severe impacts. A second Rolls-Royce Wraith had to be purchased as a donor vehicle just to make the rebuild workable. The Mansory-specific modifications on Rashford's car created additional sourcing difficulty, since Mansory is a German tuning company whose aggressive luxury components exist entirely outside Rolls-Royce's supply chain. 8 months, 23 documented episodes, and a total investment that crossed £400,000 later, the car was rebuilt and roadworthy, and what the project proved was that complex, high-value vehicles could be recovered through independent work without factory authorization, documented entirely in the open. What came after was a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, and the approach immediately collided with one of the most controlled repair philosophies in the automotive world. Alex Gonzalez, an entrepreneur and automotive content creator with a following built around high-end machinery, had been involved in a crash severe enough to write off one of the most exclusive hypercars in production. Carbon fiber structures compromised, front-end components destroyed, multiple internal systems affected in ways that went well beyond cosmetic damage. After the insurance payout, Alex bought the car back for $1.9 million, chose to rebuild it independently, and brought Mat Armstrong into the process. Bugatti's official estimate for a factory restoration at Molsheim came in at $1.7 million, placing the cost of the repair nearly equal to the cost of the wreck itself. Mat Armstrong, the CEO of Bugatti Rimac, has publicly defended the factory-only repair position, arguing that vehicles of this complexity rely on tightly integrated systems that cannot tolerate guesswork. That argument carries some practical weight, but it also produced a situation where a legally purchased car was effectively locked away from its owner's chosen repair path. The VIN was restricted within Bugatti's network after the crash, cutting off factory-level diagnostics, limiting software functions, and blocking official replacement parts through normal distribution channels. What the independent sourcing process uncovered was not something the Bugatti brand had ever advertised. Certain safety components inside the Chiron were not exclusive to the platform at all. A knee airbag module matched the one from an Audi A3, and the steering wheel airbag traced back to an Aston Martin DB11, which meant both could be purchased through normal supply chains, with no manufacturer involvement required. The Chiron-specific components were a harder problem entirely. Cooling systems, structural sections, radiators, and the carbon fiber ducting designed to channel air into the quad-turbocharged W16 engine had no substitutes available anywhere. Advanced 3D scanning captured the geometry of the damaged parts. Those scans became digital models, and the team rebuilt what could not be sourced. When the ignition sequence eventually ran, and the W16 turned over and started, a hypercar that Bugatti's entire network had locked down was running again under independent hands, outside factory walls, without factory permission. Ferrari occupies the same territory but enforces its position differently. Rather than issuing public statements about repair philosophy, the brand embeds its control structurally through parts distribution systems, official servicing requirements, and a relationship with its cars that the company maintains well past the point of sale. The Dead Mao 5 incident made this visible from a different angle when Ferrari objected strongly to custom modifications on a 458 Italia and demanded their removal, a dispute that went public and became a reference point for how far the brand's reach actually extends. In Mat's own Ferrari work, restricted parts channels required navigating around manufacturer-controlled supply routes in the same way the Bugatti project did, producing the same underlying friction between independent restoration and centralized access. Toyota does not usually appear in conversations about hypercar control, and that gap is exactly why its reported involvement carries weight that goes beyond one car. The brand built its standing on engineering reliability and a motorsport culture that flows directly into road car development through the GR Yaris, GR Corolla, and GR86, and through multiple Le Mans victories with Toyota Gazoo Racing that demonstrated its endurance engineering is lived experience rather than marketing. Toyota Gazoo Racing exists to make vehicles better through motorsport learning, and the same philosophy that produced those road cars produced the Le Mans results. The car reportedly at the center of this discussion is a $2 million machine built with that same Gazoo Racing thinking, and Toyota CEO Koji Sato has reportedly approached Mat Armstrong about rebuilding it after crash damage in a fully public format, the same documented independent rebuild format that defined both the Rolls-Royce and Bugatti projects. Mat has worked on a Toyota GT86 previously, which sits nowhere near this technical territory, but it reflects a direct familiarity with modern Toyota platforms that matters when the conversation shifts from whether he can handle the car to whether the manufacturer is willing to let him. That willingness is where the actual story sits. Ferrari and Bugatti built their entire after-sales structures around the assumption that control stays with the manufacturer long after the car has been paid for, and the brands that have resisted the most are also the brands with the most to lose from a public demonstration that their factory systems are not as necessary as their pricing models assume. If Toyota participates in a public independent rebuild at this level rather than simply tolerating one, it establishes a different standard for what post-sale ownership means across the hypercar world and places direct pressure on every brand that has spent years arguing the opposite. Independent rebuilders, open documentation, and millions of viewers watching a crashed $2 million car come back to working condition piece by piece have already shown that manufacturer control is not absolute. Toyota's active involvement would add something the industry has not seen from a brand operating at this scale: direct endorsement of the process rather than resistance to it. If that shift happens, the question buyers ask before purchasing a hypercar stops being about lap times and starts being about what actually happens when something goes wrong.